What's up, Bomb Squad? It's Jason Sircone back with you here on Podcasting Strategy Simplified. It's episode 111, and today I've got another answer to a burning question in the podcast world. Today's question: what types of questions lead to the best podcast interviews? Now, there's two ways that I'm going to answer this question because I think it's incredibly important to make sure that you're asking good questions, but I also think that the best podcast interviews aren't interviews, they're conversations. So first, let me address the best questions part of this. It's important that you do not ask surface level questions, the things that people hear on every podcast that they go on or every type of media appearance they make. If you're just putting surface level shit out there, you're going to get surface level shit in response. You're not going to get that truly engaging moment that makes a person feel like, oh man, not only does the guest say, damn, I made the right decision coming on this show, but the listener says, ooh, this is great stuff. Something that I've always strived for anytime that I bring a guest on my podcast is to try to get them to say, damn, no one's ever asked me that before. Because when you get them to say that, that means they're going to tell a story that they've never told before. Now you've got something fresh, and that's going to make your show stand out. You can do a number of different things with that clip. It's going to make somebody feel super important that you went down that path and put that much thought into your questions. And it's going to make a listener say, I made the right decision clicking play. As I said before, these are all the big pieces that are falling into place because you took the time to put some thought into your questions. So make sure that when you are doing your research that you dig a little deeper. Go a few layers deep into that person. Don't just get the surface level stuff. An example that I've always used is if you bring an author onto your show and you ask them the question, tell us about writing your book. Very generic, very surface level, more than likely not going to lead to the most engaging, exciting answer. But if you take it a different way and say, you know, with your book, I understand the creative process can be incredibly frustrating. And was there any point in time during that creation process for you that you just were so pissed off and frustrated that you just want to delete everything that you've done and just throw the book away? Now, that's something that makes them think about that entire creative process. And I guarantee you, authors are going to have a story about that in one way, shape, or form. Maybe other podcasters have brought that out of them, but maybe they haven't. And maybe you asked it in a way that made them think about it entirely different. Now, that's going to lead to most likely a chuckle, to a laugh, and it's going to relax them a little bit more. It's going to make them open up a little bit more. So now you're going to get some more engaging content. So having questions like that it's incredibly important to getting the best interview. But my advice is to focus on the conversation. Like I said before, the best podcasts don't feel like interviews. They feel more like conversations. You know, obviously the big one is Joe Rogan. He's having these 2.5 to 3 hour conversations every episode. And I'll say the most recent episode of the Joe Rogan Experience that I just listened to was his episode with Tim Robbins. Phenomenal. They had a almost 3 hour conversation about all of this stuff, and it was just so engrossing. I went on a road trip. I listened to the whole thing, and in that one trip, I was like, man, this is just good, because they were engrossed in the conversation. So it wasn't just about Joe Rogan having this long series of questions lined up to ask. He was just focused on having a good conversation with Tim, and that's what he does with all his guests. So the challenge that I have to you as a podcast creator, when you have a guest on your show, limit the number of engaging questions that you're making, and then come to the show with active listening in mind. Focus on the conversation that's unfolding in front of you. Yes, have those really engaging questions, but limit it to maybe 4 to 6. And then focus on the follow-ups, because when you ask those engaging questions and you get a really solid answer, that's going to stimulate a good follow-up. And now you're engrossed in a conversation. You may not even get to those other questions because the conversation is so stimulating. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, because as I said, the best podcasts don't feel like interviews. They're natural conversations. And in a lot of ways, when you're consuming that content, you feel like you're eavesdropping on somebody having a great conversation at a coffee shop or at the bar. That is what makes great content. So to answer the question, you want to make sure that you're not surface level with everything that you ask, but you also want to focus on active listening. You want to focus on having a deep, engrossing conversation. Use one of your questions to start that conversation, but focus on what that person is saying in response, because they are more than likely going to drop several clues along the way that will lead to the next thing that you can ask. And in the event that they don't, you'll have another question on your list that you can ask, but make it just as deep and just as engaging. That is going to lead to the best possible outcome for your podcast. And with that, we're going to bring the curtain down on episode 111 of Podcasting Strategy Simplified. Do you have a burning question that you would like answered on the show? Find the SpeakPipe link in the show notes, or go to speakpipe.com/simplified. You can record your question for me, and I will make sure that I feature it on an upcoming episode of the show. Until our paths cross again on the next episode of Podcasting Strategy Simplified, my name is Jason Sircone, reminding you that podcasting isn't easy, but it doesn't need to be complicated. I'll see you next time.